sorry I'm late. I had to stop by the Wax Museum again and give the finger to FDR.
We know Al-Qaeda, Zawahiri, is supporting the opposition in Syria. Are we supporting Al-Qaeda in Syria?
Well, it's a proud day for America. And by God, we've kicked Vietnam syndrome once and for all. Thank you very, very much.
I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked.
These witnesses are trying to simply deny things that just about everybody else accepts as fact.
He came, he saw, he died.
Well, we ain't killing their army, but we killing them. We be on CNN like, say our name, bitch, say it 3 times.
The meeting of the largest armies in the history of the world. Then there's going to be an invasion.
All right, you guys, introducing retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis, the famous whistleblower from the Afghan surge in 2012, the aftermath of it, more or less, and a regular writer for The National Interest and a fellow at Defense Priorities, and featured in my book, too, and endorsed it, too. Hey, welcome back to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, it's been a while. Been glad to be here.
Yeah, very happy to have you here and happy to read what's going on. And I almost can't believe my eyes and my ears. And in the very best way, I'm afraid I'm going to be put out of business. Yeah, right. But at least I have to go back and revise now some of the things that I had said in the draft of my new book I'm working on. Unless things really change, it looks like America is pulling forces out of Syria entirely very soon, and half of the forces in Afghanistan, they say within 6 months, but it sounds like maybe once that starts, I'm not sure what. But anyway, I mean, elections coming up there and everything. So I turn it over to you. What say you, retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel L. Davis?
Well, number one, I could not be any more happy on both counts, and I have been, doing everything I can on interviews like this and other shows to endorse this view and to reinforce why it's right. Too oftentimes people, and frankly, I can kind of understand to a certain degree why people want to ascribe various motives behind what Trump is doing or say he doesn't know what he's doing, et cetera. But I think he has shown, especially in foreign policy issues, he's got really good instincts, but he doesn't have really good knowledge of how to turn them into operational requirements or realities. And I think that's been one of the problems which apparently is going to be alleviated with the removal of Secretary of Defense Mattis, because he was a big advocate for staying in Afghanistan. And in fact, according to the Woodward book, Fear actually talked him out of getting out earlier. So now that apparently Trump has come to the conclusion that, you know what, if I'm a president and if I'm either going to rise or fall on what I think is right. So he's saying, here's what I think is right. We're going to remove the troops from Syria. We're going to remove the troops from Afghanistan, or at least reduce them, hopefully leading towards a full withdrawal here shortly. But he is correct, because there is a big, huge misconception out there. I'll just tell you, Scott, that we have to have troops on the ground, on foreign soil, all over the place to keep us safe here. It's almost become a religion. And in fact, that's one of the things that Lindsey Graham has just been, shouting to the four winds since this announcement on Syria was made, that, basically, there's going to be a new 9/11 now, as though if there are troops in Afghanistan, or if there aren't troops in Afghanistan, there will be terrorist attacks. And if there are troops in Afghanistan, there won't be. And nothing could be further from the truth. And it's even worse in this regard in Syria. And I'll tell you why. There is this belief that if we have troops on the ground there, that we can interdict terrorists plots before they start, or that we can prevent them from coming. And that's actually the rationale that was laid for why we wouldn't get out of Afghanistan earlier. But when you look at actually how terrorist attacks are started, how they are plotted, how they are prepared, it has nothing to do with our troops over there. The 9/11 report, there's two different things that I can point to that can really show you. Maybe you can link these for your listeners. Number one is the 9/11 report. That shows in great detail exactly how 9/11 actually was formed. And it was not formed because of anything on the ground in Afghanistan. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, KSM, was the mastermind behind that attack. And what he did, he was traveling all over the world to 7 or 8 different countries, Sudan, Malaysia, Philippines, a number of other places, Pakistan, to visit with a lot of terrorist masterminds. So the terrain is the twisted mind of a terrorist, not a piece of physical terrain. He went all over the place. The only way that Afghanistan even came into the conversation was when Osama bin Laden happened to be there when KSM briefed him. But he had just relocated from Sudan, and had this meeting taken place a few months earlier, it would have happened in Sudan, but it wouldn't have made any difference either, because the key area was the terrain of KSM's mind, which goes anywhere. You don't need any kind of terrain for that to happen. And then you look at most of the actual planning was done in Germany, in Maryland, and Florida, and some other U.S. states. So I don't think we're going to go occupy those with military operations. So when you look at how it happened, you can see that it doesn't matter where. Any ungoverned space will work. The second one is a Heritage Foundation report, which actually came out back in 2013, which looked at 56 terrorist plots that had been either conducted or planned in the United States since 9/11. 56 of the 60 were thwarted, and 4 of them took place, to include like the Boston bombing and the shoe bomber and some others that didn't work. But of the 56 that were interdicted, let's see, 100% of them, none of them happened because of something in Afghanistan or Syria or Pakistan or Iraq. None of them. Almost all of them had to do with things that happened in the United States. The planning was done. Some of the operational planning was done in the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, not far from here. There were people from 26 different nations involved in all of these plots. 77 of them came from the United States. 33 of them came from Great Britain. Only a handful came from Afghanistan, but none of the planning took place in any of those places in particular. And even in the places where we have troops, like Afghanistan, the planning still takes place. So that graphically shows you, in any way you want to look, that having troops on the ground in Afghanistan or any other specific spot does nothing to keep us safe. Because what has kept us safe, what did allow us to interdict those 56 plots that we know about, was aggressive global ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, close cooperation between federal and local and state law enforcement agencies, and effective cooperation between intelligence agencies of the U.S. and other friendly countries. That's what interdicted all 56 of them. Not one of them was because we have troops on the ground. So that's the baseline right here, is that we have to get everyone to understand that we are not kept safe by having troops in Afghanistan, and we will not be at any greater risk by having them come out. And the same is certainly true for the troops in Iraq and for the troops in Syria. We should withdraw all of them, not just the ones in Syria. But so that's the bottom line, Scott, is that I don't know to what extent Trump is aware of all this stuff, or if it's just an instinct and he doesn't really understand the details behind it, but he is right. And of course, I can point out all the reasons why he is graphically right. We help ourselves. We can make our national defense stronger by not spending all this money and wasting all this blood and treasure on places that don't have anything to do with our security. So I'm a big advocate.
Mm-hmm. Hang on just one sec for me. Guys, you got to check out Mike Swanson's great book, The War State. It's about the rise of the military-industrial complex in America after World War II during the administrations of Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy. And it's a real education. Check it out, The War State by Mike Swanson. And also check out his great investment advice at wallstreetwindow.com.
All right, now, but what happens is, a couple of things here. First of all, when you talk about in Syria, what they say, well, we have to be there to interdict terrorists. A major part of that seems to be a conflation and a bait and switch and trying to expand the mission. And we've seen this in multiple reports where they talk about the neocons outside of government, but inside the Bush administration, people like Jeffries and others have talked about, well, we're really there for Iran. And terrorists means now Iran, our allies and theirs in Iraq, the Shiite militias and whatever, and the threat of a land bridge, also known as a road, from Tehran to Baghdad to Damascus to southern Lebanon, and that this is all about interdicting weapons going from the Shiite alliance, never mind ISIS, to arm Hezbollah against Israel. And so what about that? Assuming all other things being equal and the priority of protecting Israel and not turning Israel over to Iran's malign influence, what do you think?
Look, a couple of things. Number one, I'll hit the last one first. Israel is the strongest military power in the Middle East, bar none. They have the greatest equipment. They have the greatest capabilities, the highest trained soldiers. I mean, they've shown in wars in the past, even when they weren't half as capable as they are now, nobody is going to dominate them militarily, the least of which is Iran, which would have to travel over thousands of miles and would be wiped out before it ever even got, a halfway there should it ever even attempt to do anything. All Iran can do is cause nuisance, and they can certainly help with, Hezbollah, and they can cause, some problems on that border. And Israel is very equipped to handle all that. So there's no risk whatsoever that Iran is ever going to use this road, something called a land bridge, to actually get to Israel to attack them. So you can just take that right off the table. But you hit it right on the head yet again with this comment about, the old bait and switch. So first of all, the whole problem in Syria started when the Obama administration, completely against the Constitution, put U.S. combat troops on the ground, on the soil of a foreign country without either international cover or U.S. Congress authorization, which is required by the Constitution. So that's where we started. And then he was supporting at first a bunch of unvetted groups, which turned out to be, in some cases, allied with al-Qaeda or giving them, weapons. That was a disaster. So he's finished doing that. And then it ended up saying, all right, you know what? We're going to ally with the SDF. They seem to be the best and the most capable and the most America-friendly. And we're going to rout ISIS out of Raqqa. And
SDF, that's the Syrian Kurdish faction.
Democratic Force. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. And even that should have had congressional authorization first. But be that as it may, that was still the mission that was given to the military. In October of 2017, that mission was accomplished, and by all rights, those troops should have come home. But they didn't. Instead, these neocon people you're talking about, some officials, some unofficial, and certainly lots of military leaders, they wanted to find a new mission. They didn't want to bring them home. Well, since Congress didn't authorize it in the first place, Congress was kind of like, okay, well, we'll just turn our attention elsewhere and let it stay. So they went looking for missions, and it turned out to be, let's put pressure on Iran. And then Jeffries, I think, as you mentioned a second ago, one of the things he mentioned not 2 weeks ago was that those troops are going to be there until Iran is no longer an influence in Syria, which is like saying, I'm going to keep, my hand until I get rid of all my fingers. They're not going anywhere. They're an ally. They're bordered with them. They're not going anywhere. So that's something that would never happen, which would mean the troops will be there forever. But here's one thing, just on a tactical level, I got to point out, those 2,000 troops up there do nothing. They provide no strategic benefit to the United States. At most, there are literally only a few hundred of those troops are actually, fighters, ground troop kind of people. The rest of them are trainers, training SDF, or their logistics, or their security. Because when you have that few people in a foreign country, where bad guys are literally all around you, you have to spend most of your energy defending yourself and supplying yourself. And so there's not much time left for those guys to go out there. So that's the first big issue right now that I have been trying to tell anyone who would listen, is that there is this assumption, this belief, very unsubstantiated, that our troops have been performing some sort of strategic utility, that taking them out would leave a vacuum. There's no vacuum to leave. There's those people in this vast tract of Syria where they're located. They're literally just dots on the sand, and those dots on the sand are going to come out one way or the other. They're never expected to be there forever. And so we need to pull them out right now, because we take enormous risk every day that they have been there from accidental clashes with Russia, maybe with Syrian forces, or just hidden from some of these numerous other al-Qaeda-backed terror groups that are located in Syria. So they're just targets in there. They do nothing positive, and we risk their lives every day for a mission that's not even in America's national interest. I'm strongly supportive of reducing them.
Mm-hmm. Hey, guys, check out Horizon.global. That's Horizen, Horizon.global. It's the new Zencash. It's now much more than a digital currency. It's a platform for all kinds of new, secure digital applications based on their great blockchain system there, Horizon.global, to learn all about it.
All right, well, but there seems like there might be a vacuum here, and we had to leave out, and I'm sorry, we're so short on time, but of course, American intervention, along with Turkish intervention, helped lead to the rise of the Islamic State, and then therefore the alliance with the Syrian Kurds to fight against the Islamic State that had blown up so big it had conquered all of Western Iraq for a time there in Iraq War III, starting in 2014, is, what even led to the part about allying with them in the first place. But now, and as we've talked about all along, at some point, America's going to betray these Kurds, because at the end of the day, we're allies with the Turks in NATO and have been since World War II, and that's not going to change. And so the worry is, or at least the asserted worry is, and there's a contemporary claim about Afghanistan too, that when we leave, there will be hell to pay for the people we've propped up here. And that maybe Trump, rather than telling Erdogan, hey, promise not to attack the Kurds, just, we'll pressure them to make a deal with Assad maybe, and Assad's forces will stand between you and the Kurds, and that'll be good enough for everyone, and let's not have another war here. But maybe he might not do that. Maybe he's just getting out of the way to let Turkey attack, something like that. What's going to happen to these Kurds? We always betray them, and that seems mean. And then, of course, the same thing with the mostly minority factions that we've installed as the government of Afghanistan and Kabul, who are facing nothing like a stalemate, but a rapidly growing rise of the new, not so new, Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan under the authority of the Taliban. And so that means hell to pay for them too, right?
You are so right, and that's the really unfortunate consequence of this bad policy that has been in place for years now in both of those locations. Is that, we do, and I have been advocating this just as strongly, on Fox and every other place that I've been on, is that Trump needs to put a lot of pressure on Erdogan not to do exactly what you've said, because it's just wrong that we have used these guys to do what we wanted to do and then now leave them on their own. So I truly hope that doesn't happen. But in Afghanistan, it's even worse because it's so much larger, as you pointed out. And I do concede that it could go bad. It could go south. And a lot of people could pay for this. And unfortunately, that can't be changed. We can do the best to mitigate it, but we can't change it. And that's the consequence of this horrible policy that we've had year after year. And what we absolutely need to not do is make it worse by extending it.
Yeah. All right. So now, what do you make of? It's fun. I get such mixed signals about the seriousness of Khalilzad's effort. One of the architects of this policy back in the Bush years now is Trump's ambassador, shuttling around all these different countries, trying to negotiate, trying to figure something out, meeting with the Taliban. And then I read months of this stuff. And then I read one where a State Department weenie says, well, listen, we're just having talks about one day having talks. And we're, this is all going nowhere. And we're not even really trying in the framework of the thing and whether or not to include Kabul and that. And I'm saying, hey, the clock is ticking apparently faster and faster on these guys. Is there anything left to negotiate with the Taliban, or they're just going to have to hands off and probably pretend it never happened?
Look, the Taliban has been saying from the beginning is that they want the United States out. And they've been saying that they would negotiate if that was on the table. And so by having this come out, we can say, all right, now it is on the table. Now then, because also of that, because we're leaving, then now the Kabul government has motivation to make a deal with the Taliban they've never had before, because they've always known that we've militarily got their back. Well, now then they don't have that assurance anymore. Now then they're going to have to make deals that they otherwise wouldn't have made. But that's necessary to get to any kind of a peace, because the one thing we got to hope for and count on is the fact that both sides, all sides, really are sick of war. And if they can get to any kind of reasonable accommodation for both sides, then this actually eventually can come to an end, which it has many times throughout hundreds of years of Afghan history. So I'm hopeful that can happen. But the idea that we need to just keep staying there forever is just not going to help us, because it doesn't work. It hasn't worked, and delaying it is just going to make it even worse.
Yeah. All right, everybody. That is Danny Davis at Defense Priorities and the National Interest as well. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Appreciate it.
Always my pleasure. Thanks.
Hey guys, this is Burden Carr from the Friends Against Government podcast here, and you've probably heard Scott talk about the crowdsourcing effort on Reddit about his upcoming book. All you got to do to get in is to donate $5 a month to Scott's Patreon and request to join the private Reddit group.
In Scott's Reddit group, you will find a pinned post outlining the details for how you can help find source material for Scott's upcoming book by listening to archived interviews and taking a few notes.
If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either myself at BirdArchist or Carr at CarCampIt on Twitter, and we'll be happy to help.
We look forward to seeing you in there.
All right, y'all. Thanks. Find me at libertarianinstitute.org, at scotthorton.org, antiwar.com, and reddit.com/Scott Horton Show. Oh, yeah, and read my book, Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan, at foolserrand.us.